Hello, in this next session, we're going to explore creating configuration templates using actions. The prior video, we talked about doing that using the promote option. And then there's also a third option if you're interested in doing bare metal configuration templates. I encourage you to look at our zero touch provisioning process in that video as well. And if you're not familiar with actions, you may want to explore those videos further. So if you have any questions about how these are created, we're going to be delving into actions and attributes, which overlaps heavily with our normal action scripting. So let's start off with how to create a template here. You see here I have an N series of 30, that's 10.128, 30.136. I have one configuration file, but let's just say we wanted to make a template for the N 2024 series. I'm going to take the simple route here. I'm just going to go in and edit one of these, and I'm going to capture this configuration as my template. Okay, so here's my templated file. I'm simply just going to do a multi-select here, select that whole thing. Now, I'm not going to super templatize this particular configuration. We're going to take substantially mostly what's here, but we're going to put some attributes around a few parameters that's going to show you how this is done. So where you want to start with this process is in the actions portlet. So we're going to right click here, and I'm going to go to the automation and actions portlet. And I'm simply going to right click here and say new. And I'm going to create this other special type called a config file generation. And I'm just going to give this action a name. I'm going to just call this my template for now. I'm going to put demo in front of this. And this is similar to the way other actions are created. If you want to confine this action to specific types of devices or specific models, we can simply find that in here. I'll go ahead and find the Dell ones for the N series here. What I could simply do is come in here and say it's applicable for all my N, for example, my N2000 series if I wanted to. Just going to pick these for now. Slide those over, or you can leave it at any model within this category would work fine. And I'm going to put this under my diagnostic. I'll put it under config. Doesn't really matter, it's just how you categorize it and where it's going to show up. So that's the first part there. The next part is let's go over our script, and we're basically just going to cut and paste that entire config file that we just copied into this framework here. So here's our configuration that it's going to be our template. First thing I want to point out here is that when we go to push this out, there's a default file name it will use called default file configuration. If you want to specify your own file name on how this gets saved, and you'll see this more apparent when we save it, but you simply want to put in the commands file name equal, I'm going to call it my temp. Oops, equal. My temp CFG, we'll call it. And then if you're familiar with our configuration management, there's also this concept of labels. So you can label your configs. Maybe it's a gold config or a base config, a compliant config, whatever it is, you can label these. And so if you do want to use a label, and this is useful if you want to restore by label. For example, if we want to say go and restore my template config label and push that to multiple N2000 series by this label, you can do this. So let me just put one in here for an example here. For those, you just want to add my label is equal to my temp label. It's called my temp label. Now again, you don't have to do that. It's just if you want to use your own names here. We'll see this here in a minute. But let's just say, for example, we wanted to templatize a few things here. Let's say, for example, one of your SMTP server IPs. Just take this one, for example. You'd want to create an IP address that filled that in. Let's take, for example, go down here to logging. Let's say you wanted to have a specific logging IP, and you want to put that in here and push that down. You'd want to templatize that. We'll do that here in just a second. When you get down to things like the management IP, for example, here you have VLAN 30, 10.128.31.36. Since you're pushing this template down in many different boxes, you're going to want them to take in their own attribute of whatever that is for that particular device. So these are already in management, so we already know when we push these down and we're targeting what's already inside of the system, we know what management IP to use, so we can put an attribute on that. I'm going to go ahead and do this one here first, because what we can do here is I can show you, similar to the promote option, we have internal attributes that are already here, target parameters, and you'll see one here that is called IP address here. So we basically activate that by turning it green, clicking the green there. And now I can go over to my, what line was that? Looks like it's right about here. And I can put in, I just double click that attribute, and it's going to put in the attribute name for that. So you can do this just like the promote, and these are using internal attributes, meaning when we push this down to whatever box it is, again, we're not going to push this down directly when we execute this action. It's going to create a configuration that's going to be pushed on those targets so you can restore them just like you can restore any other file. I'll walk you through that here in a minute. But that's how we were going to use an internal attribute that's already defined. But what if we want to define these other attributes like the mail server IP, or the mail time server IP, not the mail, but the time server SNTP, the time server IP address, or the logging IP address. Well, we may want to put a description on an interface. We're going to want to create attributes for those. So let's go ahead and see how we create those attributes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply what I have here so far. We're going to go over to our attribute tab. And we're just going to click on the create new parameter and schema. And this is just asking for what is our parameter set going to be. And I'm just going to call this, you can call this whatever you want. It's my config template parameters. But in the attribute settings where we create our new attributes. And let's say we want to create that IP address for that SNTP, the time server IP. We could come in here and create a new attribute called that. We could call this my SNTP IP. Now you could pre-populate with required values here if you wanted to. Or you can just allow free text. You're going to see how this is used in a minute, but just know that you don't have to leave it open. You could add a default values in here if you wanted someone to click a drop-down list and select, just like you can with any other action. I encourage you to look at the action script video if you want more details on that. So we'll just leave it at this. But then maybe we want a new one for my logging IP. So I'll just do another one just for an example here. IP address. We're going to call this logging IP. And again, I'll just leave it open. And then let's say we wanted to, on that VLAN interface, maybe we want to have be able to set the mask on it. So we can create another one, just called mask. It's going to be an IP address type. You can either come in here and force it to be a mask. There's different kinds of masking. Oops, I got to give it a name for it first. I'm going to just call this IP mask. And you can come into the properties here, and you can force it to be a specific format. Regular IP mask, subnet, allowed 32-bit. A variety of things here. You don't have to check these. It's just if you want to force that format. By saving it as this, it'll still allow me to put in a mask in an IP address format. Next one I want to do is, let's say, for example, I wanted to add a new type of attribute for a description on the interface. So I can add something here like a string. And I could just say interface description. Again, I could force a specific valid value of a string or provide a drop-down list. I'm going to let the user free text this in. Save that. And the last one here I'm going to do is another example of a string. I'm just going to put in something in the banner, the MOTD banner. And I'm going to let that be free texted in as well. And save that. So how do we use these now? Now that we have this in here, we go back to our script screen, but what you're going to notice is that we now have these new attributes here. So I can simply come over here and I need to activate these, make sure that they are valid to use. Some attributes you don't necessarily need to activate them if you're not going to use them right in your script right away. So these are now ready to use. So let's just go to example one of our mail settings here. Sorry, I keep calling it mail. I meant SNTP, the time server. And let's just say we want this one to be set at a certain value here. Maybe it's the third one. We'll just go and set the first one here. Just give an example. I'll set it to the same thing, but so I just come over to my SNTP IP and click that. Now that attribute has been inserted. Let's go down to the logging one. Just pick one here. We don't have to do them all. So on line 45 here, we're going to go ahead and put that in. Line 45. Blank that out. Let's put our logging IP in that field. I'm going to zoom in for y'all because this is even tiny for me. Zoom in a little bit there. The next one is the VLAN. I wanted to show you how you can put an IP in and a mask here, but on where did I lose our right here? Okay, so line 74 here. So you see that we've got that attribute we put in before. We want to maybe put that mask in. Maybe we want to have flexibility on how we enter that mask. So we're going to put in the IP mask there. And then we'll do, for example, the description. I think I have one here we can try. Use one that's here already. So let's just take this GI 105. That's on line 153. And we're just going to maybe put in a description there that we want on this interface. Case description. And the very last one we're going to do here is the banner. So I'm going to go down to the banner script here. See, my banner is currently set here. I just erase that. And I'm going to do the MOTD banner. Okay. And I'm going to apply this. I want to multi-select everything. I want to apply this. I could change the script name. It doesn't really matter here, but so we now have an action. And it's basically called this demo my template. I'm going to save it. And so this is like any other action, with the one exception here is that normally when you execute an action like you see here, this is going to go out to a device and actually put commands on the box. But when you use this special config file generation, it's simply going to create a configuration and push it down to the targets that you want. And so at that point, that configuration file will be ready to deploy just like any other. So let's just go ahead and execute this, and I'll give you an example here. Here's my template here. So let's just go ahead and execute this so you can see how the attributes all work and how this gets pushed down. So we're going to basically, I'm going to pick my N2s here. And so you see I have a variety here. Now, this template I'm not going to push into all these devices because I don't know that it's going to work necessarily because we didn't really clean it up that much. But I'm going to, for example, I'll push it down to these as an example. And so I'm going to do add all. Done. And what it's going to do is ask me now for all of those attributes for my servers. And so my SNTP server, I'm going to do 192.168.51.12. That's what it was before, but we'll just go ahead and put that in again. My logging IP, maybe I want 1.2.3.4. And then my IP mask on that interface, And then my interface description now is going to be, I'll just put template config description. And then for the banner, I'm going to say created via action template. So you can put whatever you want in there, but this will give us an example here. So I'm going to execute this. Now again, it's not going to push it to the device. It's going to create configuration on each of those that you can now look at. Now here's my configuration file that it pushed out. Now let's go look at these individually in the viewer here. I have my line numbers to find these, but you can see here on each one, it's now pushed down a new configuration. Just to maybe find something quickly here and scroll to the bottom, we should be able to see, for example, that banner now should be in there. So now you see the attribute automatically inserted in there. For all of these, you can go to the bottom and see that now it has that same banner on them. So, did that for all the attributes. We'll look at that in a little bit more detail here. Okay, let's go over now to our configuration management and take a look at those files. So here's my N2s, and let's just take this one for example here. I'm going to shrink this down. The resolution's a little bit too low there. So here we see now, here's my new file now. I have my templated config. And so it's created a new file here. I can go to my other devices as well. And you're going to see that same my temp config that has now been created that can be restored for each of those devices. And so it's just simply a matter now of just coming in, and we can review this if we need to. Here, let's go ahead and review the whole thing so we can see what a sample configuration looks like. Okay, so let's go take a look here at some of our settings here. So we will go over to our SNTP. And here we see that we now have that 51.12 inserted there for that attribute. Next one was the logging. We put in 1.2.3.4, and there you see it right there. And just hover over it so you can take a look here. Right there where the mouse is. Go down to our VLAN IP address. Remember, we use an internal attribute to tag that, and one we created for the mask. I'm trying to find it here. That was on line. It was on line 74. Oh, there's right there, 72. So here now we see the IP address. Because this device, we were targeting this device when we selected it, we knew the IP address already, so we automatically inserted it in there. You didn't have to do it. So that's how the template gets created. And then the mask is obviously we put in that script in there when we entered it in. So you see it there. Let's look at the interface. That was on line 153, where we added the description. Right there, close there, 152. Here you see, here's my description that got inserted. Template config description. That's what we typed in. And then we can look at the banner here at the bottom, and we see that again. Banner created via action template. So now this is freely, just any of these devices you can go to and restore that config. So I can simply go over here and do a restore. It's going to actually, this is where it actually gets pushed out to the device. I'm going to say execute. Okay, and it's done. And so what we can do is we can go and now check it. Make sure we can back it up again. Let's just do a backup to grab that new file. So what we should see is a second config, default config file, version 2 maybe. Let's just see here and execute that. Now it looks done. I'm going to refresh this right here. Here's our second file. I'm going to compare the first configuration down here to the second one, and it'll highlight our differences that we just picked up. So there's our logging section that got changed. The 1, 2, 3, 4. There's our template config there, entered. Before it was test QA2. And then going to the bottom there's our banner change. It went to created via action from this OMNM. Now the time didn't get picked up on the other one because we left it at the same value on the for the SNTP server. So anyway, that's really all there is to it into creating these configs. Now you might ask, what if I want to push out all of these configs all at the same time? Well, you can do that as well. So I just want to go over to my settings and on group management. And if you're not familiar with groups, there's another video on how groups are created. But if you have a static group, maybe you want to group all your N2Ks together, you could do that. Here's a group that I've created of all my N2Ks. I can just pop in there real quick and show you what that looks like. So I have, maybe 3 sets here, and say we want to push out to all of those. It's just a matter of right-clicking here, doing a file management restore. So now you're given that group. It's going to do the whole group, but you have the added option of now doing it by label. And so you can come in here and you'll see here that when I put in those first 2 lines of the config file that gave it the name and part of it gave it the label. Well, here's my label. So I could basically select this label. And now when I go to execute this, it's going to deploy those specific templates to those 3 devices or anything that's in your group. So that's a way to bulk push that out. And then as usual with all these, you have driver options depending on what it is. And so you can basically go to whatever device that you're deploying. Now, you don't necessarily know. This group could be a mixture of things. You could have multiple devices, a Cisco, a Juniper, those kind of things that have their own specific templates that are all labeled the same. If they're labeled the same, then you can push them out this way and just by the label name. But you can, depending on the device, you can come in here and select whatever it is, and you'll have options for doing startup or running or whatever. But that's just another way to do it across different groups of things that aren't necessarily the same. As long as they have the same label, that fit under that one label that you had, then you're good. Okay, that was a summary of how to deploy configuration templates using actions. I hope that was helpful. Thanks for watching.